everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Creation Entertainment Podcast. I'm Kit Bowen, and we're back. Part 2 of our favorite movie and TV monsters with myself and co-CEO Adam Malin. Part 1 you can actually listen to as well. It's down below, so if you haven't listened to Part 1 and want to kind of do a duo double feature, you can listen to Part 1 first, and then here's Part 2. Stay tuned and let us know let us know what you think. Tell us in the comments below. If we've missed one of your favorite monsters, let us know. Like, subscribe, and do all that great stuff for us. And have fun with the part 2 of our favorite monsters.
I think we're up at what, number 8?
Number 8.
Well, I'm telling you what, he is the stuff of nightmares, Kit.
He sure is.
Freddy Krueger.
Okay, I'm going to have to full disclosure here. I've never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie because I've seen the Halloween. We'll talk about when we get to Friday the 13th. We'll kind of throw in Michael Myers, Halloween, and all those kind of people as well. But I think Freddy should stand out on his own because I know he is a pretty amazing classic character. But yeah, I've never seen one. I don't like slasher movies. That's my least favorite of any of the horror movies. So I'm going to have to put that one out.
Interestingly enough, he's not so much about being a slasher, even though he's obviously got those razor sharp claws. It's more of a mind mess that he creates because he gets in your dreams. But of course, Freddy was primarily designed and created by the great Wes Craven, who directed. He wrote and directed Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. He conceived of Freddy's burned appearance, striped sweater, fedora, his razor glove, and his wisecracking personality.
Yeah.
Amusingly enough, that red and green sweater was chosen primarily because the colors are visually unsettling when placed together. They are ugly colors. And the great Robert Englund delivering a fantastic performance over multiple films. We had Robert as a guest at so many Fangoria events, and very, very much a beloved monster. Now, just some notes on the original Nightmare. The makeup artist was David B. Miller. He created the original burn makeup appliance that kind of defined his scarred face. And then moving on to some of the other films like Dream Warriors, Dream Master, Freddy's Dead, is the great Kevin Yeager, who another makeup design genius. And he kind of refined Freddy's facial burns into a more exaggerated leathery look. And then in 1994, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, our buddies Howard Berger and Greg Nicotero of KNBFX.
We love them.
Creating a darker, more realistically demonic Freddy with exposed musculature. Just as a historic side note, that razor glove was designed by Jim Doyle, built by Lou Carlucci, and that glove has sold at auction for literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I bet it has. I would imagine. I mean, the 80s slasher films are iconic. They are iconic in the horror genre. They deserve their place in the helm of horror genre. So it wasn't my cup of tea.
Well, I mean, and then certainly a sister creature to Freddy during that era is the great Jason from the Friday the 13th films.
Again, I watched one of those and was horror. I just hated it.
Well, he's terrifying, but just some notes on design from the different Jason films. Friday the 13th from 1980, he was designed by the great Tom Savini, a very dear friend of ours at Creation, who also did all of those Dawn of the Dead films for George Romero. And he appears only as a deformed child. Savini created that look. Then in part 2, Steve Miner came along as kind of the designer and also director, and Stan Winston's team with Carl Fullerton on the lead designed the first adult Jason with that burlap sack mask and overalls and that kind of the wild look. There was part 3 in 1982 designed by
the hockey mask. That's
Shelley Finkelstein. That's where they introduced that iconic hockey mask, which kind of permanently defined Jason. And Stan Winston's group again doing that work. Then on part 4 in 84, Tom Savini came back, did some fantastic work. Part five, again, Tom Savini. Part six, makeup designer Martin Becker came on board with some rotting flesh and a kind of a pretty major redesign. And then part seven was directed by the great John Carl Buechler. John Buechler is a friend of ours. He appeared at many Creation and Fangoria events. And this is a very extreme zombie design, exposed bones and spine. Very extreme and wonderful work from John Buechler. Jason Takes Manhattan, that was designed by Martin Becker. Jason Goes to Hell, 1993. Once again, the K&B guys came back. Jason X, which was kind of the Uber Jason with that cybernetic redesign, was designed by Jim Isaac with makeup effects work by Stephen Dupuis. And then the iconic Freddy versus Jason, one of my favorite films, Bob Kurtzman and K&B FX kind of created this heavier, bulkier Jason. Then Friday the 13th had its remake in 2009, which was, I thought, a well-done film with our buddy Derek Mears. Just as a strange side note, Derek, who many fans of the genre know, he's a bald dude with very minimal facial hair and very kind of a slight build. Derek was one of my Taekwondo masters at Shin's Martial Arts, where I
Oh, wow.
go for 13 years. Sir Derek was one of my instructors while he was doing the Friday the 13th remakes.
Oh, wow.
Eric not only played the character, but he had input on the creature's design, and also Scott Stoddard did some of the makeup from that remake. I mean, there are so many different incarnations, but Friday the 13th remains in the pantheon of, Jason, one of the great monsters. Right. I've got to talk about a creature that is really disgusting, but that certainly scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, and that's the Blob. In at number 10. Oh my God. Well, the Blob, the original film from 1958, is a pretty scary and nasty film. The primary designers and effects creators were Irvin Yeaworth Jr., who also directed, and producer Jack Harris. They kind of came up with the idea. And it was a practical effects that used silicone, food coloring, and slime composites. That was essentially a practical slime effect. They would speed up or slow down the camera as needed. It was designed to have a simple design.
By the way, it was an alien, to be honest.
Technically, it is an alien. So what is it doing here? But we'll go ahead and mention it
because we forgot about it in the alien, so it gets thrown in here because it's still a monster. Yeah,
that's true. But you are correct. It should have been an aliens anyway. There was 1972's Beware the Blob with, I believe, a theme song by the great Burt Bacharach, if I'm not mistaken.
But wait a minute. The first Blob that came out in 1958, that was one of the very first appearances by Steve McQueen, who went on to great fame on other movies that had nothing to do with alien life forms. So good for Steve.
True. Completely wasted in this film, but nonetheless, we love Steve McQueen. Anyway, Jack Harris came back again for Beware the Blob. Now, 1988, the remake. This is a fascinating film, and we actually previewed the film at Fangoria at the time. Chuck Gasper, Doug Beswick, and especially Tony Gardner of his Alterian Studios did the practical effects. This is the definitive modern blob design, corrosive, semi-transparent, aggressive, continually mutating, silicone, methocell, air bladders, puppetry, full size as well as miniatures. This thing was disgusting. This great telephone booth scene where this girl who you think is one of the heroes of the film, so you figure she's going to live to the end of the movie. No way.
Nope.
The blob just surrounds the telephone booth, and then it's just like curtains for her. And while she's in the booth, like some other half-digested schlub is kind of flowing past her. inside of the blob, which is really gross. I will also mention that the blob was an influence on the rotating eyeball blob from Angry Red Planet, which I think is like this Czechoslovakian or Eastern European sci-fi film of, I guess, the 50s that sort of had a blob creature in it too. But I thought that the Blob remake was, pretty good film. Anyway, moving on to number 11, Kit.
Pinhead.
A beloved fixture at Fangoria shows for many years.
Yeah.
A wonderful author and a fantastic guy, the great Clive Barker, who's created so many hellish things and is an amazing artist too.
Yeah.
But I think maybe his crowning achievement was the great Pinhead from Hellraiser.
Yes. Yes. And the original was 1987, right? And he was played by
the great Doug Bradley. Doug Bradley.
There you
Another
go.
fixture at creation events for many, many years. A very soft-spoken gentleman who completely, most of these monsters on screen are really sweet guys in real life. So it's always funny to meet them in person and see how different they are from their screen personas. But Clive designed Pinhead, and there was a makeup team that was headed by Bob Keane, who came up with sort of the on-screen design. Barker just historically created the Cenobites for a novella of his, The Hellbound Heart, and then wrote and directed Hellraiser in 1987, and conceived the Pinhead's sort of facial grid of nails, this ritualistic S&M aesthetic and theological tone, and envisioned the character sort of as androgynous and mysterious. There was also a makeup effects studio involved, Image Animation, who helped design the precise nail placement grid and created the sort of pale, scarified skin, the exposed wounds, as well as developing that fabulous leather costumes, stitched, flayed look. Just the Pinhead look is so special. In the sequels, they kind of refined his look. Makeup and prosthetic artist Jeff Portas had some work on that. And then another Fangoria favorite, Gary Tunnicliffe, was a longtime Hellraiser effects artist who actually went on to become a director. And he sort of standardized Pinhead's look over multiple sequels. So certainly Clive Barker, all of his creations, but in particular, Pinhead from Hellraiser, just a wonderful creature. Which brings us to number 12. And a disgusting creature from the 50s that got brought back by James Cronenberg is The Fly, more specifically the Brundlefly.
Brundlefly.
86 remake, but The Fly with the great Vincent Price from 1958.
Help me.
The primary designer of the original concept was James Clavell. He was the screenwriter and story contributor. Is this the same James Clavell that did work on Shogun?
I think so, yeah.
He worked with the director to kind of conceptualize the creature, and special effects and makeup designer Mel Arnold with the RKO effects team executed this look for the head, the prosthetic, the mask, the animatronics for the fly head, and that kind of man in the suit approach, which was pretty effective for 1958. But that inspired the much more complex Brundlefly in the 1986 David Cronenberg film. Now, that film was disgusting with Jeff Goldblum, and the creature was designed primarily by Chris Wallace, with additional work by Steve Dupuis and members of Wallace's effects team. And Cronenberg also had some talk in the design of the creature and the progressive transformations of the Brundlefly. This won the Academy Award for Best Makeup, so it was
quite a feat. Yeah, and that's a fantastic movie too. Just from start to finish, it's an ultimate, science go wrong kind of situation where, like Jeff Goldblum did an amazing job, especially in the transformation.
Writer Frank Darabont had a little bit of input with Cronenberg, and also the great John Buechler had some design input with Chris Wallace's crew as well. So, and it's of course influenced by David Cronenberg's body horror aesthetic. movies like Videodrome, where Robert Wood sticks a video cassette into your stomach as if it was like a video cassette recorder. I mean, it's just Cronenberg is super creepy.
It can be very creepy. Yeah, very. Dead Ringers is another one of his films that are like, what?
Or Scanners, where Michael Ironside's head blows up. That's Cronenberg, very disturbing. But I think The Fly was definitely one of the high points of his career.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on to number 13, aptly set at number 13, is Regan the Demon from The Exorcist.
Again, another movie that I never saw on the big screen, but I did end up watching it on television, and it still scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, I just kept looking up at our attic. It's like, that was, yeah.
And clearly,
of all the demon movies, and several of them have scared me for sure. Demon stuff, actually, because it's like the middle of the night kind of thing, where you wake up at 3:00 in the morning and you think you smell something burning. You're like, "Oh, is it demons? I don't know." Yeah, scares me. Scared me.
The power of Christ did not compel them, because
no.
This, of course, is the work of the amazing genius special effects and makeup prosthetic artist Dick Smith, who trained generations of people after him, and was so generous with all of his pioneering work, not only on makeup, but in terms of the chemical processes, the developing latex and silicone formulas that were later evolved in creating prosthetic makeup. Michael Westmore was a protege of Dick Smith's, and Regan's progressive possession look, it's so distinctive. The spider walk scenes, and the prosthetic grease paint, mechanical effects, aging, scarring, definitely in a class by itself. I think Smith emphasized subtlety over grotesque exaggeration, and the horror comes from realistic human transformation.
Right.
And also, I think you've got to give some credit to Bill Friedkin, William Friedkin, the great director, famous director, who also ensured that the effects were convincing on camera. So,
honestly, it is probably one of the best of its ilk. I can't really see something that, I mean, there's been several demon transformations that have been scary. Like Constantine is a kind of a fun movie with Keanu Reeves battling good and evil kind of thing. Oftentimes we don't know that they are possessed, so you've got just a normal person being possessed by a devil. But this whole transformation for this little girl, that's the thing that's really probably the thing that hits the hardest, is that she's only 13 years old. So yeah.
Great film. Now, coming in at number 14, I think it's a creature close to the heart of many of us and influenced various other characters. A big influence on Guillermo del Toro is The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Another Saturday morning movie for me. After I watched Godzilla, I thought I'm going to watch this one too, and I loved it.
1954. The principal designer was Millicent Patrick, although it's credited to several other artists, including Bud Westmore. She was historically undercredited, but really was the key designer for Universal Pictures, created that iconic Gill-man look with the amphibious features, the gill placement, the overall humanoid fish aesthetic, balancing realistic aquatic anatomy with a humanoid form. As I mentioned, Bud Westmore received most of the credit at the time, but certainly did a lot of work on the creature suit. And we had the actor who portrayed the creature at many Fangoria shows. I'm not remembering his name, although I know that the creature suit was worn by Ben Chapman. This is another guy that wore the suit, but it's credited to Ben Chapman, as well as Riku Browning, who did the underwater shots. Roy Arbogast, who we've mentioned earlier, and other members of the Universal Effects team constructed the rubber and latex creature suit based around the designs of Patrick and Westmore. So certainly he was terrifying, but kind of sympathetic at the same time. And it was designed to have some underwater flexibility, which is pretty groundbreaking for a 50s special effects film.
Yep.
Went on to influence Guillermo del Toro in characters like Abe Sapien in the Hellboy films and even in The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
I think all of those Del Toro creatures have some DNA associated with
Absolutely. 100%.
from the Black Lagoon.
Yep.
Coming in at number 15, these are spooky dudes come from the north and really, they're not above eating you. And this is the notorious White Walkers from Game of Thrones.
Well, the White Walkers themselves are the upper echelon, the ones who are riding the horses and the skeleton horses and whatnot. I think it's the whites or whatever who are the grunts. But yes, the White Walkers were an amazingly creepy and super cool. So you got to tell us who designed these, because that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's Pixamondo. They're at a makeup and effects house. The main creature design and makeup supervisor was Dave Hill, as well as prosthetics designer Barry Goer. Hill was sort of the creature designer. He was responsible for the overall look, those icy features, that menacing aesthetic. And he worked closely with the visual effects team to integrate practical prosthetics with CGI.
Yeah.
And then Barry Gower was the prosthetics and makeup designer who created the practical prosthetic pieces for the White Walkers' faces, focusing on their icy skeletal features, frost-like skin, those scary eyes.
Yes.
And then Pixamondo, a visual effects studio, mainly executed the CGI enhancements for movement. They're making their eyes glowing, the battle sequences. So they definitely did integrate practical and digital effects pretty seamlessly. I think the design philosophy was clearly ancient, otherworldly, humanoid, but sort of inspired by mythological frost giants and Norse legend.
Yes.
Terrifying, but elegant.
Yes. Great character from the Game of Thrones series. Absolutely.
Love those Game of Thrones. I mean, we could mention the dragons from Game of Thrones. They're great monsters as well. So I do want to give them a tip and a nod of the hat to them. We had the honor of producing the official Game of Thrones event in Los Angeles a couple of years ago and got the digital designs for the dragon's head.
Yep.
Executed a astonishing dragon head, which we had on display at the show. I'm not going to say how much it cost, but it was six figures. What an incredible thing. And so, yeah, there's a few monsters from Game of Thrones, but I think the White Walkers, remain close to our hearts and were pretty wonderful.
Yep.
Coming in again in no particular order, Kit.
Number 16.
No monster film would be complete without talking about dinosaurs. And if you're going to talk about dinosaurs, you got to talk about the Jurassic Park films, and in particular, the Raptors and our beloved T-Rex.
And of course, the genetically mutated monstrosities that they ended up making in the further films. But honestly, the goats are the original T-Rex and the Raptors. I mean, they're just... and I know, for when Spielberg did the film in '93, no one had ever seen anything like that. So again, he took it to another level, and made it seem like the dinosaurs were right there. And I know it was a combination of CG and life-size replicas, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the amazing Stan Winston studio practical effects in a minute. But first, I want to mention an interesting factoid. My son, the great Sean Malin, who works for the Prop Store, who are based in Castaic, California, and London, England, they have incredible stuff that they auction off. And my son is actually a curator who also affirms the lineage of props. The Prop Store, gets many amazing props. And one prop that came across my son's desk was a maquette armature of a dinosaur with lots of cables coming off of it. And it was designed by the great Phil Tippett of Star Wars fame. And what this was an evolutionary hybrid between stop motion animation and computer animation. When Spielberg and Phil Tippett were originally developing the methodology that would eventually go into creating CG dinosaurs, they started with the idea of taking a maquette and connecting it to a computer so that as their stop motion, a stop motion process is you create a maquette in a certain position, you film it. Then you slightly move it, you film it again. You keep building up each frame to create motion over 24 frames in a second. Tippett came up with this idea of connecting the maquette armature to a computer so that as they set up each frame, it was registered in a computer. So the computer built the stop motion performance. They built the stop motion performance in the computer rather than just on camera optically. And so they now had a stop motion capture in the computer that they could then texture map surfaces onto to create the original movements of the dinosaurs. Ultimately, they developed methodologies for creating the movements completely in the computer. The wireframes that drove the motion and animation of the computer subjects were completely built in the computer, but not originally. Originally, it was a hybrid stop motion process developed by Phil Tippett. And my son had this prop that auctioned for tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Incredible things have come across my son's desk. Alfred Hitchcock's Panavision camera from some of his movies. I mean, you can't imagine some of the things that those guys see. But I think that this Phil Tippett hybrid computer stop motion system for the dawn of the CG process on the Jurassic Park films certainly is a fascinating evolutionary footnote to that process. But although there was a lot of revolutionary CG in the film, a lot of that was also practical effects. And by the way, Industrial Light and Magic with Phil Tippett get the credit for all that revolutionary CG work, part of which was developed in conjunction with James Cameron on Terminator 2 in 1986 and the Abyss film.
Yeah.
But the practical effects came out of the great Stan Winston studio. And Stan, they constructed a full-size animatronic T-Rex. This thing was 20 feet tall, 40 feet long. It could move its head, its jaws, and its limbs. And members of the Stan Winston Studios, including Mark Coulier and Dennis Muren, who, of course, Muren also of Star Wars fame, assisted with sculpting, mechanics, puppetry. So these practical effects, they were crucial for realism and interaction with the actors, but it was a blend definitely of CG and practical effects. Now, Muren also worked closely with ILM, so he helped to work with Stan Winston's group in integrating the physical T-Rex with the ILM's computer-generated T-Rex, which they needed for kinetic scenes like running, attacking, and long-distance shots. And I did mention that Phil Tippett was very much involved in stop-motion planning during that evolutionary sort of hybrid phase, as well as assisted in pre-visualization, along with Steve Williams, who actually worked on CG animation. And again, there were these detailed maquettes that they used for the CG and animatronic models, but the fact that these, in the early portions of developing this methodology, they were maquettes that were attached to computers via control cables is just a fascinating footnote to its history. I think also the design philosophy, Kit, the fact that these were realistic, lifelike dinosaurs, they were inspired by fossil reconstructions, as well as some artistic interpretation for dramatic storytelling. And as you alluded to, in addition to T-Rex, I think the Velociraptors are such wonderful characters.
Oh, great. So great.
Again, Stan Winston Studios in conjunction with ILM.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, like I said, I mean, and the T-Rex at first is the monster, but then it ends up being the hero. So, it's great. And also the raptors, same kind of thing, you learn to train them a little bit. So in the Jurassic worlds, they become a little more relatable, I should say. But they're still animals after all, still wild animals. So
I
anything
think
can
there's
happen.
that scene when the T-Rex is inside of that building.
Yeah,
The banner comes down, when monsters ruled the earth or when dinosaurs ruled the earth.
right.
That is I think, a direct homage to Ray Harryhausen and the era
Yeah,
of the stop motion animators, since I think Spielberg clearly was hugely influenced by Harryhausen's groundbreaking stop motion work.
right.
But
Exactly.
I certainly think those velociraptors were pretty fantastic. All right, what number are we at?
We are at 17.
Certainly, one of the beloved monsters of recent film history are the sandworms from the Tremors films. Not to be confused with the sandworms of Dune, which are clearly aliens, but the sandworms from Tremors were designed by the great Alex Gillis and Tom Woodruff, who also went on to do a lot of work for Alien, The Thing remake. And those guys are amazing creature designers. Their company, Amalgamated Dynamics, they conceptualized and designed the sandworms. And there's a whole lot of shaking going on with those sandworms, those long segmented worm bodies, those gaping mouths with teeth, those kind of tentacle things that come out. They burrow
Yep.
and bite. They are amazing practical.
Yeah. Well, kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like obviously inspired by the Dune sandworms, of all, and obviously that's where that came from. But yeah, they were great. And it's such a fun film because, it definitely mixes comedy with horror.
Yeah, and in addition to Tom and Alec, members of the ADI team, the Amalgamated Dynamics team, including Sandy Calora, coordinated this combination of practical effects, set interaction that really gave those worms a sense of kinesis, made them very dangerous. They were fast, they were agile, they were threatening. They move underground, they
Yeah.
erupt from the sand.
Yeah.
The original 1990 Tremors was directed by Ron Underwood, so pretty cool film.
Yep.
Moving on to number
18.
Some of my favorite monsters and creatures from films are those lovable little gremlins. The gremlins. Yeah.
Yeah, I got the music. I'm not gonna hum it because I'll butcher it, but I've got the theme song running in my head right now. Yeah.
I mean, Joe Dante is such a great director. We've worked with Joe many times in the past. Small Soldiers is such a delightful film, Inner Space. But the Gremlins films, I think, are particularly charming. And those Gremlins were designed by a name we've heard before, Chris Wallace. He's a legendary creature designer, and Chris came up with a lot of different creature designs, including the pre-Gremlin Gizmo and
Mowgli.
Mischievous Gremlins. He
Mowgli.
collaborated with Rick Baker's crew on some of the puppetry support, and he designed the Mogwai, Gizmo, and as well as the kind of the ugly, chaotic Gremlins, and detailed facial expressions, skin textures, articulated features. These were great puppets. They could emote and interact realistically with the actors. Rick's team handled some of the more complex expressions and animatronic work. They had multiple versions, hero versions, and multiple versions for
Yes.
close-ups, running, and jump scenes. Sean's Prop House prop store has auctioned off quite a few of these, and these things, you get a fortune for them. They're controlled by rods, cables, animatronics. Definitely, though, mainly pretty well much all practical, which really helped them relate to the people, on camera. And I particularly loved some of the variety of them in Gremlins 2, which featured our own beloved Bob Picardo.
Yes.
Who has a Mae West gremlin that seems to be in love with him.
Yes.
And he finally succumbs to her charms at the end of the film, which is a really hysterical moment. Of course, Bob Picardo was a member of the acting stable of Joe Dante and appeared in several of Joe's films, including The Howling and Inner Space. But the Gremlins are, I still see them celebrated at Halloween, and
Oh yeah,
they're
the best. I mean, that's a Christmas movie, to be honest with you. The original's a Christmas movie.
Really great. Brings us to number 19.
Yes.
Well, you can't really have monster films and not mention the various versions of The Mummy.
What do you I don't think I've ever seen the original, but certainly the Brendan Fraser series, and then of course the remake with Tom Cruise when they were trying to jumpstart the Universal monster cinema thing again. It didn't quite work out because that Mummy failed. But
let's start with Fraser one. Let's start with the 32. We'll talk about the Brendan Fraser films in a minute. They were really great, the Stephen Sommers films.
Yeah.
1932, Boris Karloff, of course, the great head of Universal Makeup, Jack Pierce, once again delivering an iconic look, this classic rap mummy look, desiccated skin, deep set eyes, iconic bandages, and really offsetting Boris Karloff's fantastic facial features. It was the template for most future mummy depictions in cinema. Abbott and Costello met the mummy in 1948. Jack Pierce, once again, years later, coming back to create a comedic version adapted from his 1932 design. The great Christopher Lee, the great Hammer Films in 1959, delivering his own version with makeup by Phil Leakey and the fabulous Hammer makeup department. Kind of a more decayed, less stylized look. And then, as you've alluded to, the 1999 versions. I thought that those were pretty revolutionary films at the time,
Right. Me too.
Brendan Fraser, wonderful.
It brought a real action vibe to it. Universal definitely jump-started, and Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser were really great together, and just the visuals and everything were just were top notch. And even the second one too, that I thought that one did. The third one was a little problematic.
Mummy Returns is a great film. Now, The Mummy is 1999,
right?
And Mummy Returns is 2001. I mean, the fantastic direction from Sommers. Interestingly enough, Rick Baker did the initial design for the 1999 film, and Stan Winston Studios delivering practical effects. But there was a lot of CG, particularly when his jaw would expand or he would become particles of sand, blending prosthetics and digital effects in such a wonderful manner.
Yeah.
That third film, right, not quite as good. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, 2008. Rick Baker consulted, but ILM delivering much of it in CG.
Yeah.
Including Emperor Han's mummy design with golden bandages, skeletal features. And then, as you alluded to, the 2017 Tom Cruise version, where Simon Atherton delivered practical prosthetic effects, and our good friends at Weta Digital adding tons of CG work. Of course, I have a crush on her. Of course, I can't remember the actress's name.
Yes.
But she played Gazelle in one of the Kingsman movies.
Yes.
And is a fantastic. She was also in the.
Her name is Sofia Boutella.
Boutella, yeah. She was also in one of the Star Trek films. She's essentially the mummy from this film. And they did create some modern mummy looks and some good transitions between practical and CG. But I think that of all the mummy films, the first two Sommers films were my favorite.
Yeah.
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 So that brings us to
20, where we kind of have a mishmash of all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I think we wanted to just sort of pay homage on number 20, and then we have some honorable mentions. But quickly now, there were a lot of great dinosaur monsters from movie history. There was, of course, the beloved Gwangi, Ray Harryhausen's creature. Harryhausen also created the stop motion effects for the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And another monster dinosaur of that era, the giant behemoth. Valley of Gwangi, 1969. was pretty incredible. Really amazing that Gwangi was also work from Willis O'Brien, who at this point must have been really pretty old. But as his health was declining, Ray Harryhausen stepped in and finished some of that stop motion work. But the core Gwangi design was O'Brien's, which is amazing. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953, that was designed and animated by Ray Harryhausen, who had learned so much under Willis O'Brien's tutelage. And that Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a very distinctive dinosaur look. They had sculpted, obviously, miniature models, and Harryhausen pioneered his Dynamation technique that integrated stop motion with live action footage. So I think that was something that really kind of,
Right.
Harryhausen innovation that made those things look so realistic.
Right.
Also, the giant behemoth, that was actually sculpted by Paul Blaisdell, who was a brilliant 50s special effects person who created various monster suits, including the horrible alien from It, the Terror from Beyond Space, that influenced Ridley Scott in the creation of Alien. So Paul Blaisdell delivering detailed creature maquettes for stop motion animation. And Gene Warren Sr., there's also a Gene Warren Jr., but Gene Warren Sr. actually was the stop motion animator for that film.
Yeah.
And that was designed to be a massive prehistoric looking sea monster, kind of dramatic underwater elongated body. We have some honorable mentions, of course, Michael Myers from the various Halloween films, the original being 1978. Of course, that being a William Shatner mask that was used. John Carl Buechler did some work on Halloween 2. Rick Baker's workshop did some work on some of the other Halloween films. And then Rob Zombie came on board. Rob Zombie, who, of course, the notorious rock legend, who also did House of a Thousand Corpses, which is a great film.
Yep.
Did some work working with Greg Nicotero and Dave Hitchens on some of those remakes in 2007 and 2009. They rebooted it in 2018 with Chris Nelson doing some makeup and special effects design. We also should probably mention Chucky from the Child's Play films. Any thoughts about Chucky?
Well, again, not my cup of tea film, but obviously a very popular, horror figure. Lots of Halloween costumes, and there's several, doll type knockoffs from that. Well, not knockoffs, but Annabelle's another doll thing that came.
You're right. Yeah. I think Chucky is kind of an evolutionary predecessor to Megan.
Yes, Megan, Annabelle, all of those. Although Annabelle's supposed to be a real thing, according to.
But yeah, I think so. And the original Chucky from 1988 was designed and puppeted by Kevin Yeager. He sculpted and designed and built that animatronic Chucky doll. And there was an iconic kind of good guy doll look, which could transition into like a sinister look.
Actually, let's dolls in general have always been kind of a creepy, thing to do. But I would think I'm going to harken back to that Twilight Zone episode with Telly Savalas, and he plays the father of, or a stepdad, and this little girl has this doll, and the doll's like, "I don't think I like you."
I mean, dolls in general are creepy. Like when I was a kid, we used to create these horror dioramas where we would take like my cousin's dolls and rip their heads off and put like ketchup on them to terrorize people. We would create a creep show when I was a kid. That gives you some idea of my sensibilities. Also an honorable mention, as I had said earlier, the incredible artistic monster creations of Guillermo del Toro. Who are some of your favorites? That guy from...
my guy from Pan Labyrinth. That's a messed up film.
Screwed up. He's got eyes on his hands.
It's a messed up film. It's a messed up. It's not a happy movie. But my favorite's probably Doug Jones's Shape of Water creature. I just love him. Yeah, I love him.
Who himself was kind of an evolutionary descendant of Ape Sapien from the Hellboy.
Yes, absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful creature designs from Del Toro.
Yeah.
I mean, we could pretty well much just keep going forever and ever, but I think we've made our point.
I think we've made our point.
A lot of monsters in television and movie cinema history, and they've either scared the crap or entertained us for many, many decades, and I'm certainly grateful for them.
Yes. So let us know some of your favorite monsters, and if we missed any, let us know, and we'd love to hear from you guys. Subscribe and like and do all that fun stuff below. But yeah, tell us what your favorite monsters were.
And Kit, it's always a pleasure discoursing with you and looking back on some of our beloved films and TV. All of these people that contribute to cinema history, we're beholden to all of them and grateful for all of them for the wonderful entertainment they've given us. Well, Kit, thank you again for another amazing session.
Yes, thank you, sir.
And to everybody, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys soon, okay? Ta-ta.
Bye. So that wraps up our top 22 or so. I don't know how many we talked about. I know we added a few in there of our favorite TV and movie monsters. Let us know in the comments if we missed anybody and what you thought of the podcast. And coming up next, we have our first Supernatural convention in Norfolk, Virginia, happening January 30th through February 1st. So if you're in the area, in the Washington, D.C. area, or anywhere close to Norfolk, Virginia, come and check it out. We've got a great lineup of Supernatural guests, so it should be a lot of fun. Take care, everybody.